So I've put a title here on this YouTube video that's going to be a bit polarizing, and I do acknowledge this. And any of my friends who love the traditional Latin Mass, just hear me out here a second. Don't get too bogged down by the title of this video, defending the Novus Ordo. We live in a time where, sadly, in the Catholic Church, things have become very polarized. And I just wanted to bring something back to my own experience, my own lived experience regarding the Novus Ordo Missae, and why I'm defending the experience I've had. So as growing up, I was born after the introduction of the new Mass, as it was known in Ireland, and so it was the only liturgy that I knew growing up in the 80s. But I was also fortunate enough for 10 years to have experienced the Novus Ordo in Latin, to actually, have learned the Novus Ordo in Latin, which I didn't know anything else. I'd never experienced the traditional Latin Mass, the Vetus Ordo. I didn't know any difference. I couldn't compare anything. It was presented to me, I experienced it, and so forth, and that was the liturgy that I experienced, and I thought it was very, very beautiful. I remember in Rome, I would serve Mass when priests would say their individual Masses every morning. I would often go and serve Mass with one of the priests. So and it was in a little chapel, an altar. The priest was saying it ad orientem. I mean, that's just the way the chapel was laid out. And I thought it was very beautiful, very moving, very intimate, very, very real, a powerful experience of the Eucharist. Because at the end of the day, the Eucharist, we experience it as a person. Like we're in contact with the body of our Lord. And our Lord isn't static. His real living presence comes to us. And I find it very sad in the church today that we have this really sad time in the church that Rome has come down on the traditional Latin Mass as if it was, as if it's the problem in the church, when really it isn't. I suppose there was one incident I just wanted to bring out was, and I'm just going to pull up here the instance that comes to mind about the liturgy. Was a couple of years I went to traditional Latin Mass the first time, and having brought my experience of the Novus Ordo in Latin for so many years, I could follow the traditional Latin Mass. I could understand the traditional Latin Mass. I could understand the readings in the traditional Latin Mass, and so forth. And I remember the very first traditional Latin Mass I'd gone through. I didn't know much about it. I didn't know to stand, what we were supposed to respond or not. There was not very much the congregation actually does in the traditional Latin Mass. It's not a criticism. I'm just saying there's not many responses that we give compared to the Novus Ordo in Latin, where we would have given the responses back during the Mass. And just before the Our Father in the traditional Latin Mass, the priest says "Audemus dicere," which we dare to say, and in the traditional and in Latin Mass, the Novus Ordo, everyone would say the Our Father, and in the traditional Latin Mass, it's only the priest that will say the Our Father. The congregation just remains silent. And I just thought it was very strange because, precepti salutaris moniti divina institutione formati audemus dicere, if I remember correctly the words, we dare to say. It's not I dare to say, it's we dare to say. And I always thought it was beautiful to actually say the Our Father, or sing the Our Father in the Mass. So many of experiences like that, did impact me. I love I'm a great admirer of Archbishop Lefebvre. I think he's one of the great heroes of the Catholic faith. That's my personal view. I know this is going to irk some people, but Archbishop Lefebvre was was an extremely well-formed man. He was the head of the Spiritans, one of the largest congregations in the church. Archbishop, delegate. This guy was one of the best formed priests in the church, and I understand where he's coming from, the liturgy point of view, but that document that from which we get the Novus Ordo, that document in the Second Vatican Council, Sacrosanctum Concilium, was overwhelmingly voted for in the council, overwhelmingly, including by Archbishop Lefebvre. He signed it, and so we can't just say that, for example, concelebration is something that's evil, that shouldn't happen in the church. We see this often in the East. It's very commonplace. There's many good things in Sacrosanctum Concilium that we just cannot just say, oh, no, we can't. Let's reject the Second Vatican Council. Everything in it is bad. What has happened, sadly, is you had a document, then you had the interpretation of the document by Annibale Bugnini and that team that prepared the new rite, and then which was presented to Pope Paul VI in the Novus Ordo Mass, the new rite of the Mass, was presented to Pope Paul VI in Latin, and then from there on you had the interpretation of that by different episcopal conferences around the world, and the translation, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And so we've had a document and an interpretation of the document, and an interpretation of the interpretation. And what you've ended up with is, to all intents and purposes, we have a Mass now that is not really recognizable as the Mass as it used to be 50 years ago. It's unrecognizable in certain places, not everywhere. If you go to the Shrine of the Blessed Sacrament in Alabama, Mother Angelica built that shrine, the Blessed Sacrament, they have the Novus Ordo ad orientem, towards the orient, towards the east, the priest facing towards the east, leading us in prayer. They have the communion rails, the communion cloths, and yes, you can see there is some continuity here, there is some resemblance, and you have a beautiful museum to the Eucharist in Alabama, going through all of the history of the Eucharist. So yes, you can have this, what some people call the unicorn Mass, this really rare Mass, where you can see the elements of continuity. But to most intents and purposes, in most places that I've been to, it's unrecognizable sometimes what you see in the church when you compare it to the Mass that Archbishop Lefebvre would have defended. But I have my own experience. I experienced the Novus Ordo in Latin reverently, very reverently. I know this is, people haven't, but that was my experience. I used to love it. I used to pray. I had my missal. Really loved Latin. Learned immense amount of Latin from it. Still remember it. And I always thought it was powerful. It was beautiful when you hear a priest saying the consecration, "Hoc est enim corpus meum quod pro vobis tradetur." To hear those words, to ponder those words, this is my body. It's a beautiful language. It's a living language, and for us it was living. And it broadens your horizons, opens your mind, it educates you. Latin is a great tool for education. That was my experience. So I'm just defending the experience that I had with the Novus Ordo in Latin, which I thought was beautiful. I didn't know anything else. I couldn't compare it to anything. Today, this is 2021 in Ireland. If you were to hand me the Novus Ordo here in Ireland, as it's said today, which is, I mean, most people don't believe in the Eucharist anymore. It's universal. The Eucharist is universally given out in the hand. Practically always the Roman canon, the Eucharistic prayer 1, the Roman canon is hardly used, so the music can be very what it is. If today give me the traditional Latin Mass, the Mass that Archbishop Lefebvre defended, give it to me any day, because that's the Mass that most resembles the Novus Ordo in Latin that I experienced. So I had the Novus Ordo, and what Mass most matches that Novus Ordo Latin Mass that I used to go to? Where can I find a Mass that most matches that? I mean, it is the traditional Latin Mass in Ireland. It's not the Novus Ordo in English. Although, if you go to the Brompton Oratory in London, they do celebrate the Novus Ordo in Latin ad orientem very, very, very reverently. And I suppose the key element here, guys, is what I want to really touch into, is Vatican II said the Eucharist is the source, summit and centre of our faith. It is the source. It is that jewel, And Taylor Marshall, very controversial Catholic commentator here, Taylor Marshall. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but he is right when he mentioned it once. He said the Eucharist is the jewel of our faith. It is the centre. It is the most precious thing that we have as Catholics. It is the jewel centre of our faith. What setting are we going to put this jewel into? If you had a beautiful diamond, would you put it into a piece of tin or copper metal or something like that, or would you put it into something that's strong, beautiful, elegant, that elevates the diamond? So so many times our liturgy downplays the essential nature of the Eucharist, downplays the real presence, without a doubt. The reason why the majority of Catholics don't believe in the Eucharist is we have dumbed down the Eucharist. We have desacralized the Eucharist. We have turned the Eucharist into something that's so banal, that's so worthless as such, really. And you just have to go to a church in Ireland to see that you can understand, okay, there's something deeply wrong here. If we're not doing everything to encase the Eucharist as the most beautiful treasure in the church and to pass that to our children, then what are we doing with the faith? When a priest led us in prayer ad orientem, he wasn't turning our back to us. He was leading us towards the jewel, the treasure of our faith, the Eucharist. No, everything in the Mass should be directed towards the Eucharist, towards our Lord. It should be not. We are worshiping it with Him, and it's sad in a way that we seem to have destroyed our liturgies, and we seem to have these liturgy wars, and we have Pope Francis coming down on the traditional Latin Mass, and there's no talk about reforming the abuses that we see in the church today, in the abuses in the liturgy, which are rife in the church everywhere. I've seen everything because I've gone to all of the masses, but I do want to defend my own experience in the Novus, my own lived experience of the Novus Ordo, because too often we place ourselves in silos. So the traditional movement will only go to traditional Latin Mass, and if you say, well, have you been to a Novus Ordo? I know people that would never go to a Novus Ordo Mass, and I can understand why they wouldn't go to a Novus Ordo Mass, because many of them are really bad. It's all about the priest. The priest is the centre, he's the presider, and he has to perform to us. And I can understand it, but not every priest does that, and not every Novus Ordo Mass it was like that. As I said, my lived experience of the Novus Ordo in Latin was very, very, very beautiful, very reverent. And the great thing, when a priest says the Novus Ordo in Latin, well, he's not going to ad lib things to him. And now we're going to say the consecration, so let's do this, and well, let's give it plug. It doesn't happen. You say the black and do the red, and that's it. So I wish we didn't polarize ourselves too much into different groups, but it sadly that's what happened. And I can understand what happened in the 1970s and 1980s. You go back and you look at what happened in the 1970s and 1980s. Every time there was this horrific liturgical abuse, and obviously somebody would send to Archbishop Lefebvre, well, look here, look, they're using plastic jugs and Tupperware, and some priest did it with Pepsi. It did happen, actually, or burgers, or Burger King, or all of these crazy liturgical abuses that happened, and everything got sent to Archbishop Lefebvre. Well, look what they've done to the Novus Ordo, Archbishop Lefebvre. You can imagine the world that he would have lived in, in a world that would have got smaller and smaller as he was sidelined and ostracized. This great man, this great saint, in my opinion, place yourself in his mind how he would have viewed the destruction of the Mass, And at the other side, all of the liberals would say, well, look, this traditional bishop, we have to get rid of him. He's just too extreme. He's too blah, 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 blah. And where was the dialogue there? Where was the returning to Christ as the center of our faith? So when I say I defend the Novus Ordo, I defend my lived experience during a part of my life. I don't defend it. I don't have the theological wherewithal to defend the whole change, because that goes way above me. That I can't do much there. I can't change it. But I do think as Catholics it's time for us to renew the Eucharist, to go back to the Eucharist, to put the Eucharist back at the center of our liturgy, to direct our prayers and our minds and our thoughts and our actions and our direction towards the Eucharist, guys. This is where we go in the church. If we do not do this, we fail the church, we fail our children. And we need to listen, we need to learn, we need to read from people that disagreed with the change in the Mass. At the end of the day, it was the Mass of all ages, the Mass that nourished so many saints. It can't be wrong, forbidden, or not considered sacred today. But at the same level, if you defend the Novus Ordo, you need to return the Eucharist to the centre. You need to love it. You need to show the real presence of the Eucharist. That's what needs to happen in the church today. We need a great Eucharistic renewal of the church, as John Paul II asked for in Ecclesia Eucharistia. If we do not do this, if we do not draw people back to the Eucharist, there is no other way of bringing Catholics back to the church, because from the Eucharist will bind everything together in our faith. And just my thoughts on it. And let me know give me some comments on this. Let me know your thoughts. How can we do this? How can we renew the Eucharist? How can we show greater reverence to the Eucharist? Because I really do believe that our liturgy should resemble more what the traditional Latin Mass is. That's my view. And I think it's on us now to open the doors so that future generations can experience the beauty of the Eucharist in our liturgy. Just my thoughts. Take care. Bye bye.